Con.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can click on the little link below to join us in Zoom if you want to be part of the conversation. If you're here as an attendee and you are wondering how all these fine people became panelists while you're an attendee, it's because they got here early, before 6:40. If you are, we open the doors at 6 o'clock in the morning. I can't promise anything. Today we were doing tech issues with our panelists. Sometimes we're talking about just about anything. So there's no promises between 6 and 6:40. Between 6:30 and 6:40, we distribute the Discord link. The Discord link is where all of us keep on talking about this between shows. So definitely you can jump in. By the time I do this announcement, the Discord link has expired. So you have to come back another day. At 6:40, we start mic checks. Once you see us starting mic checks, it's the panel is closed and you'll have to come back another day to join us. But we would love to have you. So if you watch this and you think that you have a better idea, you think you have knowledge that we don't, you might. And we'd love to have you join and become part of the panel. So please watch this and think about where you could contribute and then jump on. Even if you're not ready to say anything immediately, you're more than welcome to jump on and at least experience what it looks like on this side of the discussion. Now, as attendees, you have a specific duty here for us, which is that you are actually the producers. So you're going to drive this show more than probably any other show in the world. You need to ask questions, vote on those questions to help prioritize our conversation. So the speed at which our conversation moves and what we cover is really all up to the attendees asking questions. So you can, you'll find in the chat a link to the Makana chat, which is what we're using. And in the Makana, you can ask questions and vote those questions up and down. And you're really driving driving the whole conversation. Now, the first hour, 7 to 8 every day is all just Q&A, general Q&A about media production. The second hour is usually something that's very specific. So Mondays are kind of a wild card. Tuesdays, we have audio. Wednesdays, camera and video. Thursdays, a special guest. And Friday and Saturday are education. So Friday, today, our second hour will be all education. If you have questions that are specific to education, please put edu : and then your question. That way we know to keep it for the second hour. So as you're adding those questions, just kind of keep that in mind. And then and then we'll have the same thing tomorrow between 9 and 11. We'll be talking about education. And we're really focused on that because we know that a lot of educators are trying to figure this stuff out. And for our panelists, as we keep moving, especially through the second hour, please stay focused on the conversation. If you start wandering off to something else, we'll probably put you back in attendees. so just letting everybody know. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. Phil, are you able to jump on the questions for us
Certainly.
today?
Happy to do it.
All right.
Wayne Hayton asks, is OBS to Zoom a good option? I've been using OBS to Facebook Live concerts. Watching Daria yesterday made me want a two-way conversation. Up to now, it's me talking to the camera and watching the chat room. Would be great to have two-way video for sure.
Jeffrey, and then Jason.
First of all, I want to congratulate on 100. This is the 150th episode. So congratulations on that. And it's not a bad idea to do OBS to Zoom because then you have another level of control, even if it's single camera. I do Wirecast to Zoom and use the virtual camera out or the NDI camera out, depending on how it all works. So you just have extra control of how things look on your end, and that's and sound as well.
Go ahead, Jason.
I think it's a great idea. The most important thing is an abundance of testing. Be sure you understand the OBS platform before you're going live. Also, don't update the day you're going to do anything on the show. And as I guess as a final thought, it works much better on a PC.
Go ahead, Colin.
I would take issue with it working better on a PC, but that's individual experience. The thing to consider is whether or not you need to route your audio through a switcher. I've used OBS and Wirecast. I'm currently using Wirecast. I do not route my audio through Wirecast because I don't need any added control over my audio. To me, the video adjustments are much more important. So think about your use case and you can avoid a lot of hassles like Greg was having with audio sync by just not including your video switcher in your audio chain.
Go ahead, Phil.
Just incidentally, it was a great session, and she's a really great performer and using it right. I would love to see somehow this group to be able to curate some sort of clips or list of people doing it right, whether it's virtual conferences, great teaching moments, or great musical moments, so that we can show our clients, here's
Right.
how it's supposed to be done, not just talk about it. And I think that was a great example of somebody really getting it.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff?
Looking at Wayne's question, he's choosing between Facebook that he's currently doing and Zoom. So my question for him is he going to jump up to the level that gives him a Zoom webinar? And is he going to have a second person there who can foster that two-way conversation? Or is this just really a streaming of a concert?
Well, and yeah, and to your point, if you want the kind of the hangout experience where we're all just going to be in a room, we're all going to talk to each other, meetings is probably all you need to make that work. But you're right that if you want to have that live interaction, I think that if he's looking for that live interaction, one thing to think about is also in the webinar platform is bringing certain people on and letting other people watch as audience. Not everybody wants to. We invite everybody here to join the panel, but generally about 10%, 20% join. So not everybody's ready to be jumping on and having their camera on, or even just showing themselves as not joining. So I think that Jeff's point is very valid, that the meeting versus webinar is something to think through as far as who you're gonna actually interact with to make that work. Anyway, go ahead, Stuart.
Just on the basics, it's something that I haven't actually tried, because normally when we're setting up, it's somebody else who does the connection to YouTube and the like. With how Wayne's asking about OBS and Facebook, can Zoom feed Facebook? It's something I literally don't know.
It sure can. Yeah, it absolutely can. And we may get to a point where we distribute this show. I'm actually getting close to getting ready to do that, where we distribute this show to Facebook and possibly LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. There's no reason why we can't distribute them. One of the reasons we kind of kept it close is because of the Q&A stuff and everything else. And so with a more distributed Q&A, we could actually do some other things to it. So you can definitely do that. You can go to one at a time, Facebook or YouTube. I chose YouTube over Facebook because average view time in YouTube is much higher than Facebook by an order of magnitude typically. So you get generally 10 times more view time. And I measure view time as success. I don't care about how many people see it. I want the people who see it to stay. And so I view YouTube is better because it's in that sense, because it is better it's a destination. That page is not part of a stream. So the way we use, to kind of take this into a little bit of a rat hole, but the way we use Facebook and Twitter is oftentimes to gather eyeballs and then move them to a platform with more view time. So getting exposure makes sense to throw it on those things. But what we want to do is bring them back to a location where there isn't a feed. The feed is really devastating to average view time. So that's why we don't do it to Facebook on our own. What we can do, which we haven't started doing, is doing something like an RTMP stream into AWS or into Restream, and then sending it out to everywhere that we want to send it, or do more of a production where we grab onto this. And what we're doing every day on a day-to-day basis is grabbing onto these and streaming them for the client. And so it just takes there's more technical headroom. While I have the capacity to do it, doing it every day without a budget it hasn't been something that I could turn on immediately. So we're kind of taking the easy route at the moment, but we're going to continue to kind of look down that path. But you can absolutely go to Facebook. It's another drop down in my menu that's possible. Next question.
Darren McMahon from Leeds. Morning all, nice to be back. I have been asked to recommend a laptop for someone who will be doing a lot of presenting on Zoom. In all your experience, can I assume it must have a dedicated graphics card rather than using an integrated one? I might need to push their budget up a bit.
Go ahead, Mike. Can't hear you, Mike. You're not muted. You're still muted. We're going to go.
Hello.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
I don't think you need a dedicated graphics card just for Zoom. You do need it if you're going to do anything special like Mimo Live or editing or whatever else. So, I mean, I would suggest you get a MacBook or a MacBook Pro if you're into Windows. I think a MacBook Air is probably underpowered, but the Intel graphics card works okay. I ran for a long time just using a Mac Mini with the Intel card, and it was fine.
Go ahead, Stuart.
I'm going to disagree with Mike completely there. The advantages of using one of the better or more professional NVIDIA GPUs is it can do the H.264 compression for Zoom or for vMix or for OBS in the GPU itself. So that takes load off of your CPU, takes load off of your RAM. It basically makes the whole stream a lot smoother. The difference between a GTX card and the professional Quadro branded ones is the GTX ones are limited to 2 streams for, I think, a lot of the cards, and the Quadros is unlimited streams, assuming that it can do the calculations.
Go Jason, and then Colin.
I have never seen anyone do Zoom without having other things running in the background, and accordingly, 1,000 times yes, you always want a discrete graphics card.
Go ahead, Colin, and then Jeffrey.
Jason touched on the distinction I was going to make here. A dedicated graphics card, to my way of thinking, might be an external GPU. You don't need that. You do, however, need a discrete graphics card, which on the higher end MacBooks, the MacBook Pros, are listed in the specs as that discrete graphics card, meaning you just have another chipset built into the laptop that is not the embedded Intel graphics. And that's
Jeffrey,
really the way to go. You don't need to go to a separate graphics card in the case of MacBook.
Okay. Jeffrey, and then Chuck.
Discrete graphics is a great idea, of course, but also remember that there's a camera and a microphone that you need to deal with on a laptop. Make sure you have the best ones, and I'll try and put a couple laptop options in Discord for you.
Go ahead, Chuck.
I know there's a lot of Mac reasons to go with Mac, but on a PC, you don't have to get a super huge machine. If you get one of the business class or some of the gaming computers, that will be fine to present every day on Zoom, as long as it has, like he said, a discrete graphics card. I happen to have a GeForce RTX in this one. It was about an $1,800 gaming PC, but some of the business from Dell and well, I don't want to mention others because they can be tricky, but yeah, you don't have to break the bank necessarily, but don't get a sub $1,000 one.
As someone who does a lot of presentations with Keynote outside of this, or in Zoom, does a lot of presentations. The other presentation tools are not anywhere near Keynote. So, I mean, I work across all of them: slides, PowerPoint, and so as a result, if someone says I want to do lots of presenting on Zoom, I'm going to immediately say, well, then I want to use Keynote, which means that I want to use a Mac, which then puts you in a MacBook Pro. MacBook Pro, one of the ones with a discrete graphics card, I think would probably be your best bet. The other tools, there are no other set of tools that are completely integrated and, free that are on your, that allow you to do the presentations or generate content as well as the Mac. So I'm just gonna, you can take all the other things, but you're gonna get a PC, and then you're gonna have all these other apps that you have to kind of figure out. How do I put together my video and my graphics and my thing and all these other things that are relatively inexpensive. So while the Mac itself is more expensive, the two things that are less expensive is the software you need to generate the content and your time. Colin?
You've preached the wonders of Keynote for a long time. Do you find that the web-based Keynote is equivalent to the desktop
No, it's
Keynote?
Worthless.
In functionality or in ease of use?
It's just painful to use.
Ease of use.
And I don't use, and to be clear, I also don't build my final graphics on iPad. So I'll start on an iPad I always start, so my presentations always start with a list in notes of these are the slides. Then it goes into then I open up Keynote on my iPad and I basically storyboard every slide so that I keep my train of thought and I don't start thinking about graphics. Then I bring that all into the desktop version and I finish it, because doing it in the iPad, the little bippity bops, it takes too long. So then I oftentimes present from my iPad. So there's it's kind of a chain of process there that I use that I find to be the fastest way to generate slides, relatively good slide decks. All right, next question.
A. Mitchells asks, Alex, please can you explain all the steps to get from a basic Zoom account up to your 1080p setup? Also, does this mean that you will now have a device always logged into this Zoom as a deadhead and logged into your upgraded business account to boost the Zoom to full HD every day?
So I don't have the room, which I believe is what's required to bump this up. We get bumped up because Guy jumps in with a room, and that forces all of ours to 720p. I'm getting 1080p now as of this week, thanks to Guy's recommendations on how to do this, which is the steps that I took was I bought a business account. Now, if you call, I hear that you can order less than 10 at a time, but I needed more than 10. So we ordered a bunch of these as business accounts. Those are like $20 a month. So I think I have 15 or 20 of them. And so we bought those business accounts, and then we went into support and sent a support slip of said, we would like to go to 1080p. And so you have to request it. And then within a couple hours, I was kind of amazed at Zoom's speed at which I figured, oh, maybe this will take a week or two. In a couple hours, I got it back asking for justification. Why do you need 1080p? And I said, oh, I'm doing these high profile events. We're trying to move away from Skype, blah, 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 blah. And within 2 or 3 hours, I was activated. So the total time from the time I requested it to the time I was activated was less than 24 hours for 1080p. It only works on a point-to-point. So it's only when 2 people are in do you get 1080p. So you will not get, in fact, it'll drop. We found that it oftentimes without the room involved, it'll often drop all the way down to 640 by 360 if you add any other people. So it's very important, but we've done tests and events now with the point-to-point for each person. Now, what we do is we call, if we have 6 people talking, we call each person on a point-to-point from a Dell. So, and the second window is going out. It has almost no graphics. Unfortunately, it still has the name at the bottom, and it has a little thing at the top when we move our mouse, I think. So we scale up by 107% to get rid of that. And we found that the video was very agreeable. We would love for Zoom to get rid of the last little bits of graphics on that second page permanently, or have some setting that says no graphics on second window, and so that we can just have a clean aperture. And we think that they could take over a lot of broadcast use if they could just get that last little bit out of the way. Courtney?
Yeah, I wanted to know how you handle audio and those when you do the ISOs.
Yep.
Do you have to create a separate mix minus, or does Zoom get confused?
It's super complex.
Yeah, that's
super complex. Like, there's like a person in the world that I know that knows how to do this, and that's Brian Maddox, who was joining here for a while with us. But our pipeline is super complex. So it is they are being cross mixed in a CL5, and then that CL5 is using Dante to integrate with a ClearCom Eclipse. So they're actually hearing the Eclipse. That way we can talk back to each person individually as we go through it. And so all the mix minuses are all being generated inside of the mixer. And then we have on top of that is all of our comms. And we can literally have a person on Agent IC talk into the ear of any one of the participants in the middle of the show without it going into broadcast, for that process. And so it's a very powerful system, but it's a lot of hardware and a lot of setup. And we spend a lot of time making sure that Brian stays healthy, because it's a very, very, very complex system.
The average mortal wouldn't be able to do anything like that.
Well, it's just, you just have to know that it's a lot of hardware, because you also have things like, we have, ASL interpreters that have to be able to talk to each other only, and not to the rest of the show, and not to, like, there's like custom things that have to be done, and then you have captioning that goes out to you. So you have things that go out to captioning from to the EEGs, and then there's there's all these. It's a very, very complex process to do that. You can do very simple mix minuses. The Constellation will actually do its own mix minuses on the inputs, so that's a simpler version of that for audio. So that there's ways to do it. It's just that our way to do it is, we've been doing it for a long time, and with enough budget and enough time, you end up just keep on adding things to make it better and faster and more robust. Colin?
Just going back to the 1080p request grant process, is that upgraded status now reflected in your admin console somewhere, or is it a matter of hanging on to the email and saying, "See, you told me you were going to do this"? And
no, as soon as they turn it on, you see it in the settings, because when you set when you activate the settings for HD, it lets you choose then for that group. So you can do it by system wide, or you can make that available to just specific groups in your.
Are you granted access to do it for all streams, for all one-on-one streams at all times, or can you all concurrent one-on-one streams, or can you?
You could say this group of users can use 1080p and these group can't.
It can't. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is more bandwidth required. There is more bandwidth required. So it is not, if you're just doing basic stuff, it might not make sense.
But they're not limiting you to a number of concurrent 1080p streams less than the number of meetings you have set up.
Not that we've seen. And partial is we're paying for it. So every one of those ones that can, that's the difference is that all the, and to Skype's defense, even though I really enjoy attacking it, is that it is free, so they keep on breaking, but the fact that they break it every 2 weeks, that something isn't working, is just mind numbing.
And Alex, you had a bit of a public declaration yesterday about your relationship with Skype.
Yeah, today is our last Skype show. We have one Skype show left, and then we have a break period next week from the Skype show that we do. And we're going to use that to transition over to Zoom. We're still testing vMix and neural net. So those are still in the mix of us figuring stuff out. But the issue really is from a consumer connection that everybody has Zoom. Everybody knows it. So while we would love to get into a more, like the vMix really interests us, its choice of the way it manages cameras scares us a little bit. Same with neural net, of using WebRTC too heavily. The fact that you have an app that we understand very well, that we can manage audio and cameras and everything else into it more effectively, is trumping it's not the right word, but is overriding everything else. Next question.
Yes, Peter Moore wants to know from Guy, what's your thoughts on the ATEM Pro ISO so far?
What do you think,
Guy? I hooked it up last night. Really amazed at the ISOs, actually. So, it's just the regular ATEM Mini that I've been using every day. But then if you need that capabilities of being able to record isolated tracks, it'll record them. The thing that was kind of surprising to me was how much bigger the ISO files were. So they're running at about 65 megabits per second per
65? 65 megabits per second?
Correct. Wow. Yeah. So if you record and stream, or actually if you record, the program file is only going to be like 4.5 megabit or whatever you set it at. I think you can go to 6, or if you go to XML, you could probably bump it up a lot more. Right. But I was surprised just out of the box to open up the resolve file, kick it around. I mean, it's cool stuff. I mean,
I will admit that I was mostly worried that the ISOs were going to be down at like 8 or 10 or 6 megabits per second. At 65, it's actually a pretty valid record.
It is, yeah, for archive purposes even. And then, of course, you can always record RAW into your camera if you want the higher resolution and want to go bananas. So I think it's going to be a winner for the right person, like Victor, who wants 4 cameras, wants them isolated, wants to go back and edit.
And are these H.265 or H.264?
H.264. Yeah, it's got to be lightweight for the processor, because this thing's only got so much, as somebody else said, poop.
Mickey and then Stuart.
Yeah, sorry, 65 megabits is 4K?
No, that's 1080.
1080. Oh, yeah, then 1080 at 65. That's decent, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Stuart?
At what frame rate, Guy? I'm thinking of the same sort of questions that Paul's had for his recording from his camera and what have you, and needing a decent throughput on a hard drive and what have you. Because one of the things I spotted locally available is a RAID device that actually sits in a regular hard drive caddy, which I thought was cool for a couple of NVMe drives in a RAID.
Yeah, I'm just using the 1080p 30 option, and what you're seeing right now is the Touch Director mini app, which I'm not actually going to change my resolution because we're on the fly right now, but this is the actual Touch Director hardware that's controlling this unit right now. It's pretty neat that you can see the audio levels. You can switch. I don't want to, well, you won't be able to see if I switch. But this is a cool app for, I think it's $30 to be able to, in the URL for and stream key for my restream.io right through here. It's kind of interesting the way they do it is with a, you can't see it right now, but there's a QR code that you enter in, and then you scan that QR code and it'll populate the whole stream ID. So you're not sitting there typing in all those cryptic numbers. It's a really cool companion app to be able to use.
And that's an iPad app, a third-party iPad app.
Yeah, it's a third-party iPad app, but with this thing, if you're going to be streaming all the time, you don't want to be under duress trying to type in all that stuff
Absolutely.
or copying and pasting. It's easier just to go to the website,
Well,
copy paste over there.
Again, that's like, I think one of the power. Here's the thing that's going to happen. That is the API. It's the mixture of the API and the ATEM Mini is going to change the way we think about editing forever. And the reason for this is because the API is wide open, which means people can write to it. You're seeing these third-party apps. But the problem for most of the switching industry is that they don't have critical mass to build software for it. If you're a software developer and you've got 4,000 possible users or 8,000 possible users, you have to charge a lot of money for that tool, because you're only going to get some small percentage of those folks doing it. And you have to pay the bills. At hundreds of thousands of ATEM minis out there with an open API, this is now an incredible market for developers to build customized tools, whether it's for school or corporate or sports or whatever, of building tools that utilize this hardware that is $20 or $30 or $50 that solve specific things that people might want to do and build their own apps. And we've never had a time when a switching system, except for OBS, had critical mass, but a hardware switching system never. And so I think that, and there is an argument for the hardware metric switcher, is that if you don't have the computer that can handle OBS or Wirecast or other things like that, you still have to spend money on that computer to do the switching. And so $300 or $500 or $800 or $700 or $800 or whatever those numbers are, you can do all of this stuff. And so I think that we could possibly see an explosion of tools that we've just never, and the Touch Director, I think, points to that now those markets are viable in a way that they weren't. And once that digs in, so that Mini makes that market available, and then you have a whole bunch of people using it. And of course, all that software works on all the switchers. It's a really interesting model. And again, once you get people into it, as we know from the Apple Store and everything else, once people go into an ecosystem, pulling them out of that ecosystem is really hard. Jeff, Victor, and Colin?
Guy, question about Touch Director on the iPad talking to the ATEM Mini. How is the communication? Does it happen via Wi-Fi to the Ethernet, or can it be wired Ethernet?
I actually had laying around one of these USB-C to multi-devices. I think Emily has a 7-port. We're on another forum joking about this. I actually do have one that has Ethernet and HDMI out. So Touch Director requires that you run this app via Ethernet.
Good, Victor, and then Colin?
I saw a video yesterday, a first look at the ISO, and in, I believe, DaVinci, he was able to kick out an XML file that Final Cut Pro was able to read just like that. And so in 2 minutes, he was editing the same thing in Final Cut. So that was pretty impressive.
And Colin?
And quickly to pour some cold water on Alex's joyous moment of API-ness. No software developer is going to develop software unique to a particular piece of hardware when they could develop that same software with NDI input and output and address the entire market of all switcher customers.
Well, there already are. There's a whole bunch of them. Go just do a search for
I just showed one.
When you say no developer,
I say yeah, okay. There are people who will do custom software for any platform you want. I'm saying if you're trying to develop a market-wide product, you're not going to tie yourself to anyone's API. You're going to do something that takes NDI input and output, or WebRTC input and output, or whatever that you're doing.
This is the Android versus iPhone problem, which is that the people who bought the people who bought minis have proven that they're willing to buy things. And so the thing is that immediately makes them more valuable, and so to a developer. And again, I think at 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 switchers, it's a small market. At
Except
hundreds of thousands of
that's the
switchers,
thing.
it's a big
It's a
market.
fixed market size, and it's a market that the software developer cannot himself grow.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, Stuart.
Oh, I mean,
in a year, we'll have this conversation.
I would love to be proven wrong, but you know,
all I'm saying is that
I can probably prove you wrong right now, Colin.
Okay.
Bird Dog make NDI encoders and decoders, so anybody who's got a hardware-based switcher can bring NDI in or out of that system straight away.
Yes.
But the question I forgot to ask Guy before about
that's not proving me
rates,
wrong. That's proving me right.
Well, it proves it's possible. But the question I forgot to ask Guy with the frame rates is: does the ISO allow you to do replays, and can you do them at slow motion from the ISO files out live?
And not that I've seen. There's not a spot there. You'd have to have a hyperdeck to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really set up for, I'm doing a class or an event and I want to record it, not I want to use it for replays. I see where you're going, Stuart, but I think you'd still need a hyperdeck for that. Victor?
Just quickly, my audio
by the
video
way,
sync is completely off.
It is.
So the ATEM audio, once again, something happens. I started perfectly and now it's off again.
Yeah.
But is it dropping frames? Not a single frame,
No,
just all
it's
the
not
audio.
dropping frames. It's just desyncing. So, all right. Anyway, next question.
Hey, Mitchells, Alex, can you repeat the advice given to Victor regarding the tweaks and hacks to streaming on Instagram? It was an excellent recording and would be great to hear for the actual office hours time. Thanks.
So I'll give you the easiest one, then a harder one, and then Colin will give you the geeky one that you'll never use. So the easiest one is that you use YellowDuck. YellowDuck will find the RTMP ingest. You'll be then able to stream to it. That's the one that breaks your terms of service. May not work all the time because someone will turn it off, but it will allow you to probably produce the highest quality, the easiest to knock it out. And I think we should all use it. So we should all force Instagram to change their policy because it's stupid. The second one that we've used for years for anything that requires mobile only, so this would be TikTok and Instagram and Periscope, and before that Meerkat and Facebook, is you take a cell phone and you point it at a screen. Now we build them very carefully with a tent so that there's no glare on the screen. And it will, the advantage of it beyond any other geekiness that is done is that it will always work because it doesn't break terms of service. It's an analog loop, so to speak, that basically means that no matter what people do, or they try to close holes or do whatever, you can always push go on the phone and get graphics and whatever else you want. And so we've used those literally what we were talking about. We've used them with multi-camera in another continent, coming back over satellite, onto a screen, into a phone, and onto Facebook. And so those things can be, well, it was Periscope, I guess, at the time. But the point is that it will always work, in that area. And there's no weirdness, and you don't have to figure out your your frame size or anything else in your streaming software. So my recommendations are YellowDuck and the phone. Colin, did you want to?
Oh, sure. Why not? Let's be predictable. So as Alex phrased it, this is the geeky solution. As I look at it, it's the much more cost-effective and more powerful solution. You can download the BlueStacks Android emulator, and you'll find on their support page, they describe Instagram-specific documentation with easy-to-follow steps that allow you to use your whatever webcam you have attached to your computer, including virtual cameras, to stream directly into Instagram.
Next question.
Okay, Kyle Hammond asks an interview setup question. Camera 1's a high-end cinema quality with nice primes, shoots 4K max. Camera 2 is a mid-grade mirrorless with zoom lens, 1080p max. Which setup would you prefer for the close-up angle, and which one for the medium wide, and why?
Well, first of all, I'd avoid doing that like the plague. But I would go down to for me, I would take the 4K down to 1080p. You got to go to lowest common denominator and be cutting back and forth between those. Trying to stretch things out isn't going to really work. And then I would tend to use the close-up I'd use the highest quality camera for the close-up because that's what you should stay on most of the time. Go ahead, Bill, and then Mickey.
Yeah, it's actually the last thing that Alex said is how I would think about it as somebody setting up the shoot, which is what is the audience, what do I want the audience to see most of the time? If the presenter is compelling and they're not stumbling and mumbling around, I'm going to stay on them probably 80% of the time with just cutaways for a release when I have to edit. If on the other hand, they're having trouble and they're really struggling, then your B cam becomes mission critical because you're trying to patch together something that looks smooth without a lot of jump cuts. And so you need to have as matched a signal as possible.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, exactly what Alex and Bill said. And just remember to let the client know that your final deliverable will be 1080. You cannot deliver 4K if your lowest common denominator is 1080.
And remember, your biggest problem with this combination will not be the resolution, it will be the color. The chances of those two cameras looking the same in the same color space will be difficult, and you'll spend most of your time trying to figure that out. Stuart and then Jeffrey.
One small adjustment, if you've got anything that is like a dedicated down converter, rather than down convert the camera setting from 4K to 1080, use a dedicated piece of hardware. You'll get a better result. You'll get a sharper image than you would if you're recording at a lower setting.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
And this depends on whether we're talking about for YouTube or actually for high-end production or anything like that. But here's another thought. If you use the 4K, if you decide that you want to do some sort of zoom in type thing or pan or something like that, you can use the 4K into another system that would then switch it to 1080 so you can create different types of shots of your overall, and then use the 1080 for the interviewer or interviewee. And that way you'll have a little bit of movement in there.
Great. Next question.
Garrick Parmalee. I just got a couple of Blackmagic 4K studio cameras. Congratulations, Garrick. The breakout cable has a lot of stuff I don't need. Where can I buy a breakout cable that is power only?
Oh, we're talking about the little one, right? The little
Micro Studio 4K. Yeah.
Yes.
You can't just cut them all off and put electrical tape over them, and then there'll only be one of them. Go ahead, Michael. Sorry, Michael Ball.
There is a company called Wooden Camera that makes accessories, and they used to have a little sort of, it looked like the DB9 plug, and it just sat right on the side, and it had a power and I guess a 2-pin LEMO, I think. I couldn't find it on their site when I just looked this morning, but they still exist on eBay and elsewhere. And it was great for the brief moment that I had a micro cinema camera.
I think I know what Jason's going to say. So go ahead, Jason. I'll fill in if I'm wrong. Go ahead, Jason.
All right, let's see. If that skeeves you out, then you can always just clip one. It's $50 to get get the DB9 converter.
Nope.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. I know exactly. Okay, go ahead.
You get one connector, get the other connector, get some wire and a soldering iron, and the pinouts are all in the documentation. So
Yep.
you can. It is like this is a super easy little project to do it. Of course, you get it wrong, you ruin the camera. So don't get it wrong. Like it is power.
You
You're
won't
putting power
get
into
it wrong. It's 3 pins if you need power.
But do be careful if you put the pins into the signal. It may not work. The camera may not work the same way it did before. So do be careful. But I would say that building your own in this case would be relatively straightforward to do and relatively inexpensive. I haven't seen any that are built. I think when we've needed it, we've actually just cut them off and taped over the ones that we didn't need to keep it simple. But it was just easier for us than to think.
How
about
big
it.
an octopus of cables are we dealing with in this?
I'll show you. Hold on.
Thing?
I got one right here. Go ahead. While I'm
if
grabbing
you're
that, Jeff.
soldering, you should also have a multimeter, and you can double check the pin
I
out
was
before
about
you
to say,
plug
if
anything
you use
in.
a multimeter, you're not going to get it wrong.
Well, we need to have an hour about, or maybe a week about soldering before we start telling people to go do it. So that's the one thing I want to say. That go ahead, Stuart.
As the Australian in the audience, can I suggest that the word is better pronounced soldering? Because it actually has an L, not 2 Ds. The other option, if you don't like all the stuff that's there, is get some really large heat shrink, put it over the sections you don't want to use, and just shrink it down into a bundle so it just sits there. That way you don't risk shorting leads as you can if you trim a shielded lead onto its core.
So this is the one cable you need for power. And these are all the other cables that come with it. And I think we've used almost all of them. So, think about it. RefIn, I don't know if I've used RefIn for these little cameras. This is the S bus, which we use to control. You can control your mini studio camera from a remote control for planes. You can change the aperture and focus and everything else. And so that's why the S bus is there. Then there is a B4 lens control, which I actually not used on this B4. We have put this micro onto a B4 lens, and it's a pretty funny sight, but we haven't really used it.
Can I just say, putting a B4 lens on a camera that size would just be
it's
absurd.
Hilarious. It's hilarious.
I think it's more putting the camera on the lens instead of the lens on the camera.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have this is a Lank. And then PTZ control. So anyway, that's why they're all there. It's really cool. But you're right that, and again, I would build one. But Guy,
one other option here, whereas heat shrink is a semi-permanent prop thing where you have to actually cut it off and do it again. You might try plastic cable wrap. That's just a coil that you can bundle things together with. Works just as well.
Or if you look at the back there is a Canon battery, and so you would just jump over to your friends over at Amazon and buy
the little
adapter. There we go. That's the winning solution right there.
No. I've tried
that. Guy went. He waited. He was drafting on us. He just sat there in the back, just waiting for us to go through all these complaints.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, next question. We got more questions than time. All right.
All right. Troy Warrior Video 361C webcam comes without any control software. What would you recommend on a Mac to gain control over it, if possible? What on a PC? Thank you, as I have teachers buying these for Zoom home use. Plus, they love the Pile Mic solution.
Oh, that's great. I've used manual camera and webcam settings, and the controls on the 1C have been mediocre. I guess is what I would say. It doesn't seem to respond to Mac controls as well as the 920. To be honest, I mean, it just doesn't. Getting all the way down to the lowest amount. We talked about this before the show. Getting all the way down to the lowest setting has been difficult, and the Zoom controls are limited. So I haven't found a great solution for it on the Mac. Bill and then Stuart.
Is that an auto iris, or could you just put a piece of ND over the lens to try to get rid of some of that overexposure?
You could, but I mean, yeah, but when you buy it, you think that you'd be able to take it all the way to zero, and you can't.
I'm
Stuart?
just thinking of these teachers to do something cheap.
Yeah, it's painful. Stuart?
On PC, you'll find that the controls are built in. They're part of Video for Windows going back to Windows 95 or 98 SE. But any app that allows you to capture from the camera, you should be able to pull up the settings and adjust things like your shutter speed and your iris and what have you, if the camera supports it.
Yep. Victor and then Guy.
On the Mac, webcam settings is fairly good, but I agree with you, it's not perfect. Is my sync back?
Yeah. What'd you do?
Amazing. I'm not using the ATEM. I'm going back to my regular.
We're gonna have to figure that out. All right, Guy.
Yeah, the one that I bought for $4 on the Mac was the Webcam Adjust app, and it has one that was called Powerline, which I spoke with Dan, and he said that mine must have, for some reason, went to 50 hertz, and so I had like this rolling line, and Webcam Adjust just with one click, and then I adjusted the white balance, and I was pretty happy with it.
Okay, we'll definitely check that out. Next question.
Wayne Hayton, watching Greg do the latency dance made me ask, do anyone know what Daria's audio path was to Zoom and where she deals with latency?
We talked about it yesterday. So I think they talked about it a little bit yesterday, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's in the show. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I think they were mixing down on a totally separate system on the totally separate mixer, but the interface that was actually feeding Zoom was a UA. I forgot exactly what model.
A universal audio.
Some universal audio interface.
Yeah. Next question.
Garrick asks, when building a video studio with almost 14-foot high ceilings, how high would you mount a light grid? We'll be accessing the lights and moving them often, probably.
So, Garrick, this is Garrick. Okay, you're right there. So, what I will say about lighting grids, if there's any way you can put it on a hoist, boy, does it make your life incredibly it's an amazing experience to be able to bring them down, work on them, and pull them back up again. I'm just saying.
I do have a good budget, but not a hoist budget.
Well, it doesn't have to be. I mean, how big is the grid?
The room is 25 by 26 feet.
I mean, remember, I'm talking about a motorized hoist. You could literally have chains that you roll up, with it's a pulley system that you can use to bring it all up and down. Yeah, you don't have to have it doesn't have to be a really complex hoist system. It can be pulleys that you use to bring it all up and down, and it's life changing. I will not understate how much of a difference it makes to be able to move it up and down, because there are times when you wish the lights were a little higher. There are times you wish that they were really low, so they're right over top of somebody for a close up. But the main thing is that you're running around, so you either have some kind of scissor lift, or you have something smaller than that, and then you are running around with a ladder. The amount of time you lose doing that with a grid is stunning. It's just, we didn't have it for our first grid. It was 12 foot, and we didn't have it for that first grid. And it's so much time, so much time that you're going to spend moving one light. And here's what it does is it changes your creativity, because you don't do things because you know how hard it'll be. And so one of the things you always want to think about as you build these studios is, how do I make things easy? Because I will be more creative when I know that that's a small fix and not half a day of work to get that over. And it allows you to adjust much faster. So you do have to you have to get a good pulley system, but it can be done, and you bring everything up and down, and it's just, again, it's life changing, to do that. That's my only suggestion there is to look at that. Otherwise, put it up as high as you can, because you can't make it higher. so I mean, you can't move it up later. So what you would do then is you can have arms that come down. You have arms that hook to it and bring the lights down lower. But it's a much more painful way to work. But we definitely work in a lot of studios that have that, where we're dropping arm attachments to bring our lights lower. So we work with a lot of studios that Jeff Francis is showing a chain system. It's a little complicated because you have to get the chain system to work on the corners, or you have to centralize. There's a bunch of things that make that a little harder. But and again, if there's any way you can stretch a budget to have a hoist system, it is being able to push a button and bring it down, and then work on it and push it back up and have it all go back up. It will change the way you use the studio dramatically. This is not like a little it's not nice to have. In a studio, you put that in, and it literally changes the lighting for everything that you do all the time, because it's easy, because you can just make those changes and then move past it. And lighting is super important, and where those lights are, and you won't change it nearly as often if you don't have a way to get to those easily. Stuart, then Bill, then Mickey, then Colin.
Creatively, a studio with traveling battens that lower the lights down and what have you, yeah, it helps. But one thing that's missing here is safety. Your feet are on the ground. You can't fall off a ladder. You can't fall off a man lift. So you bring the lights down to where you're working. You make sure they're secure. Your safety is massively improved. I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill, Mickey, and then Colin.
The other way, rather than lowering the whole grid, is to use a system of sliding rails and pantographs. In my old studio, I had a fabulous system. It was the IFF Studio rail system, and you have fixed rails in one direction, movable rails in the other. They're on carriages, so you can move your rails into different areas. And then the pantographs gives you up and down. So literally, you can take a light and move it in 3 dimensions. You can pull it down, move it over, move it up until you dial it in exactly right. I really miss that system. It's as flexible as a lowering grid. It's just a little simpler and more fixed at the top.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest the same thing, a pantograph system. But bear in mind that pantographs generally can't carry as much weight as an entire grid with a hoist.
Yeah, and that was
so. I mean, if you're just putting up LED lights that are light and a soft box in it, that's fine. But if you plan to put 2Ks and an HMI, maybe not.
Well, and also once you have a grid, if you have a grid that works, you start putting everything into it. You want to get everything off the floor, and so when you have a grid that's easy to get to and available and robust, you'll stick everything up there. You'll hang cameras from it, and you'll hang big cameras. You'll hang all kinds of other things from it, because it just clears out your whole space, your whole studio space. Go ahead, Colin.
Now, I've not tried this, but as you were describing the corner management problem and the XY drift of and what one would presume would be XY drift of a hoisted grid, you might look at exoslides. It's a motion control system designed to be mounted around 2020 extrusions. So you get, the standard aluminum extrusions. Again, it's a standard industrial profile. Anyone can get them. And then you run the exoslides. They clip around the extrusion, and so you have each corner of your grid fully motion controlled.
For motion control, it will absolutely work. For that much weight, I don't think it will.
Well, you don't put the weight on it. The weight is supported by your hoist. I'm talking about the swinging of the grid in X and Y, not the management of it in Z.
Right. Yeah, there's a bunch of ways. I mean, if you go into that system, the other thing that I would suggest, Garrick, is on the floor. Also think about the floor. If you raise the floor up with they make raised floors that are about 3 inches of plastic, and they interlock. And if you're building a studio, you put those all along the floor, and then you don't have a lot of cables. so you basically can pull them all up, run cables underneath it, set it all back down, and it just cleans up your studio like that. And so
you can find those in data centers. So look for network management.
Well, the data centers have really thick, really big ones that are deep, but they make them for events. They make these ones that are like 3 inches deep or the inch and a half, and you can manage all your cables underneath and just have them pop up where you need them. It's a much cleaner look, and it's also a safer look. Next question.
Richard Lavery, we're a venue in the UK, and they're aiming to receive online touring shows. We aren't sure what options there are to receive a stream and then send it back out to our audience via our own system. Simple option so far is just giving them our CDN RTMP details.
This is what, I'll just say, this is what the Elemental link was built for. You send them a box that does the thing. They don't have to know anything. Just plug it all in. It shows up in AWS, and then you send it out. This is what, you don't know what they're doing. You don't know where they are. You don't know how it's going to work. They're not technical. All they have to do is plug the box in and make it work. I think that'd be my suggestion. If anyone raise their hand. Okay, next, really fast, because we're gonna go into speed round here. Go ahead.
Very quickly. Richard seems to not want to use AWS. He has his own CDN. There are similar boxes to the Elemental link for $250 that will allow you to provide, and I would say you can use details other than the AWS.
You can use your own CDN. You're just using this as a pass through and then sending it out from there. Go ahead, Beishi.
But why use a pass through? Anyway, I'll send you some
because it's Zixi
Discord.
Because it's Zixi.
Yeah.
All right,
use something like, you can use Restream.io as well, custom RTMP, so you can bring it in, or StreamYard even, and just use something like that, or a cloud instance.
Zixi is at least 5 to 10 times more stable than RTMP. So if you're trying to get something that's going to come out, so that's
you need something like, you could use the LiveView LRT as well as a destination, or SRT basically, that works as well, and just host it on cloud.
Sure. Next question.
Jamie Baker, what is the best way to use an iPad, not Pro, as a mouse or drawing pad with a MacBook Pro running Mojave?
There are a couple apps out there that let you use, I can't think of them right now, but there's a couple apps that are available that let you draw to, what are those apps? I used to have them, but then
Duet? No, you're not talking about
Duet.
They also exist for Android. Yeah, there are a bunch
Duet.
of them. Look for iPad touchpad or iPad mouse or something, and
Duet is what I was thinking of, though. It works reasonably well.
Yeah.
Next question. We're going to move really fast.
Ray Franklin, does anyone have experience with Hopin.to? Client interested in using it soon.
We've talked to clients that like it. I still feel like it's kind of event skeuomorphism, So I don't like the concept, but I talk to clients that seem to be excited about it. But they're mostly
it does have
clients.
The one advantage of a better breakout room management than Zoom has. But yeah, it seems new and a little flaky.
Yep. Next question.
Michael Ball, it seems that it's possible to embed Zoom directly in a web page via an iframe. Has anyone tried this?
I've seen it as a feature. Go ahead, Colin.
You don't need an iframe. Zoom's documentation gives you a way to embed their entire UI, but they don't let you change the UI in any way. It's right there in the Zoom documentation. It's just some JavaScript. You don't need an iframe.
We're gonna move really fast. Next question.
Tanya Posovats attended a cook-along, and the chef had a camera on his face and a camera on his hands, but I had to keep switching back and forth on Zoom. Better options would have been
for him to have a switcher. so whether it's a mini or OBS with a stream deck or something like that, or a foot pedal, having the person sourcing it be able to switch, or having them set up something, whether it's TeamViewer in the most basic form to other things, being able to have somebody else switch for him. And I imagine there'd be a way to do that through some kind of remote, the remote control, but forcing you to do it. Now, the other way to do that is to have somebody doing a webinar experience and somebody else doing the spotlight so you can watch it, so that somebody else is doing that switching in Zoom for you. Would be another way to do that to make it a little easier for the viewers. So that'd probably be the easiest one.
Do you have that same pinning functionality in Zoom meetings as webinars?
Use Spotlight. Use Spotlight. Pin will be personal, but Spotlight will be global. Okay, next question.
And if you have control of the actual computer, you could just switch the input source.
Right, but I'm saying you could do it in Zoom by just simply using Spotlight. All right, next question. We're going to keep moving.
Michael J. Hi, Alex. Apparently Google Play Music is going away. Any thoughts?
No, I don't have any
Good
thoughts about
riddance.
it. I don't use it. All right, next question.
Rachel Ann Clifton, back to graphics card. My Mac states Intel Iris Pro 1536. However, there are PSAs that state this may not be what my machine really has. How do I determine what I really have? System profiler?
Sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say, Jason?
In the system profiler, in the system.
Yeah, the profile is telling you exactly what's in there. So if you do about this Mac and you put it in there, it's not gonna beat around the bush. It'll tell you exactly what's in the machine. Mike and then Jeffrey, 10 seconds each.
Rachel says that the message on 9 to 5 Mac is that it's actually incorrect of system profiler is saying. So you actually don't know what it has in it unless you were to open it up, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's highly unlikely. But anyway, Jeffrey.
The other part of the thing is, if you look on the bottom, there is a model number. You can search on that model number, and pages will tell you what's in your specs. Even if it's wrong, it'll tell you, hey, that's wrong.
Everymac.com. Next question.
Craig Hibbard, for low cost lighting, has anyone used the lights down low but have them face the ceiling for indirect lighting?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you have a white ceiling or light ceiling, like pounding, just pushing something up into the light. Anyway, Bill and then Jason.
Yeah, ceiling bounce is a traditional thing, particularly if you have a light that's too bright. When you point it at someone, point it at something neutral colored and let the light bounce on.
My key light right here, and I'll be able to, once I get the switcher back in line here, I'll be able to show it to you. My key light right now is bouncing off a card right in front of me. It's not. It was too bright. It's still a little bright, but it was too bright, and so I bounced it off a card to loosen it up a little bit. Go ahead, Stuart.
All the light that I'm getting on this side of my face is actually coming off of a white sheet of core flute from the lights that I've got above me. So it's the same. Bouncing is really common. If you want something that bounces really nice, look for polyurethane sheet in white. It's like the foam that goes into packing everything. You can buy it in sheets that you can trim down to even make model aircraft out of, and it is brilliant for scattering light as it bounces.
Jason and then Mickey, real quick.
They pretty much nailed it. Just if you're going to bounce off of a painted ceiling, be mindful of the color.
Yeah. Mickey?
And yeah.
Oh, you've shown it.
Yeah, to what the Stuart has alluded to, bouncing also gives you a softer light because the ceiling would be larger and appear as a larger source to you than like a spot.
Last question.
Kevin McCardle, anyone have a recommendation for hardware that does picture-in-picture? Wondering if you can get something similar with a cheap HDMI splitter that will take two signals and make a composite.
Cheapest hardware I know that does picture-in-picture is an ATEM Mini. Jason?
Yep. +1 to that. The Demon Quad will do it, but it's not less than the ATEM Mini.
Right. Yeah.
But really do it in software if that's all you're trying to accomplish.
If you have it. So, all right. We are now going to switch. And if you're an educator and you want to join the panel, this is the one time where we allow folks to jump into the second hour. So, Mickey, can you bring folks in and also do some mic checks real quick?
Yes, sir. Bring them in.
I'll be dropping off. Thank you, guys.
Or actually, could someone else do the checks? Because I'm like, I don't know if you guys hear like the pouring rain.
Very good.
Oh, that's what that is.
I'm going to follow Victor's example and leave as well, and leave more space for educators, and enjoy the rest of the show, guys.
All right. Thanks, Stuart.
Me too.
Same
Me
here.
too.
Bye bye,
attendee.
everybody.
Okay.
I vote for Bill to do the mic checks.
Bill, do the mic check. Bill. Is Bill here? Did we lose
Test 1,
Bill?
2, 3.
Oh. Did we lose Bill? Bill disappeared, didn't he? All right. Now, Greg, it's going to fall on you to do the mic checks.
Okay. Well, I better do myself first. Testing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's pretty good. Is it okay for you guys?
Sounds good.
Okay. Who's new?
Kent, Roscoe. The ones at the bottom there, they should come in near the bottom there.
Okay. Peter Moore,
Roscoe.
have you been in before?
Peter's here, or he has been, I think.
He has been?
Can
Okay,
you move
Roscoe.
me to attend? Can you move me to attendee, please? I don't need to be on now. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to give this a quick run at this, and it looks like I'm banging right around 20, so I feel pretty good. All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
sounds okay. And Kent? And
Good
Chris
morning.
Clark after that.
Good morning. I am on the Shure SM7B on a Focusrite. So it get turned up a little bit, maybe.
Doesn't sound like that, Mike.
No, it sounds like you're on something else.
Oh, let me see. Oh, you are.
You're absolutely right. That was.
Okay, so drop it about 10
Yes.
dB.
So now I'm too high, right? Or just up a little bit more. Testing
no,
1, 2.
You're way high. You're way high.
Okay, testing 1, 2. Got it. We're in the red.
Just keep talking. Now you're overshot. So it takes about 5 seconds to register. So
Okay. Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. I'm talking. I went too far.
you're way low, way low, way low.
Okay.
Okay, stop there and talk for a bit.
There we go. Let's just wait a second, see what happens. Up. That might be right there. Okay.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Testing 1,
That
2.
works.
All right.
That works.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris. And then John after that.
Good morning from Tempe, Arizona. We are on day 2 of the return of 50,000 students and 50,000 employees to Arizona State University.
And one click up, please.
A little up. Okay.
Just one. Yeah, we'll give you one click.
We had a thunderstorm last night, which cleaned
That's
out
good.
the air a little.
That's lovely. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No, that's
with the
fine.
weather report. But
No,
okay,
keep going.
John, and then Bruce Francis. Don't hear you, John. Want me to come back?
Yeah, go to Bruce.
Okay, Bruce.
Okay,
And then Chuck.
good morning from Naples, Florida. This is Bruce Francis hearing. I'm seeing 17. I got a 20, 22. Is that too loud?
Give me 2
Test,
clicks
test,
up.
test. This is a
2
test.
clicks up. Okay. Hang on, let me do that. Does that go a little better? Okay, a
I
little
don't know.
higher.
Keep talking. It takes about 5 seconds for
Takes
the
a while
the.
before that goes up, and I just put
Exactly.
a couple clicks in. How does that sound now? It's still reading 20, 23. That's minus. Is it working or not? I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
give me one more click up, and I think we're okay.
Okay, great. Here it goes. That work? Okay, let's try that. How does that sound? Is
That's
that
okay.
not-
That's
no,
okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, great. And Chuck Braverman.
Hi, this is Chuck, testing 1, 2, 3 on AirPods. Just using AirPod through a Mac.
Okay,
Sound
keep
all right?
talking. Yeah, it does.
Hello, 1, 2, 3, 4 from Thousand Oaks, California.
Okay.
Another day in paradise.
Okay. And you'll have to forgive me. You don't have a name up. But
My name is. My
no,
name
no, no,
does show.
not you, Chuck. No, you're good. That Blair, thank you. I was trying to remember your name because I remembered you, but Blair and then Stephen Kimbrough.
Hey, Greg, how you doing? Coming
I'm
here
good,
from
thank
Maryland. So check
talking.
1, 2, 3.
Keep
How am
going.
I sounding? Is that working?
Yeah, it's working.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Berkeley. That's all I have to say. Okay, back to John.
This is John from Monterey, California, where unfortunately the thunderstorm started fires. So it's very smoky here and I'm very hot. I fixed it, but not the way I should have.
Yeah, but you don't sound that hot. Just maybe one or two clicks down, and then you'll be all right.
Story of my life when people say I don't sound that hot.
Oh.
Okay, I think I got what I need.
Okay, I think that's everybody.
All right. So if you have questions for our panel that are related, we are now focused on education and having discussions around education. And if you have questions that you'd like to discuss around media production specifically, but online education, I think we're all getting started this week. I know my kids did. It was amazing. Not in a good way. Anyway, so so if you have comments or most of the questions, put them into Mukana, and we'll start to discuss them. Just to start off, my kids are 11 and 12, and they started yesterday, and it was as close to complete chaos as possible. So it was I thought that they'd be a little ready, but they didn't even have the links. Like, you know, they was like, it was going to be in Zoom, and there were no Zoom links for the kids to go into. And there was, you know, I think the only reason my kids got in is because my wife called the school every 5 minutes until she got someone got through, and then harangued them until she got links to get into classes. And so anyway, so that's been pretty much how it started. Go ahead, Colin.
Since we discussed this previously, and I expressed some concern about how you're going to arrange your kids in their learning space, that you had them relatively close to one another. Did you find that
they're
that
in
was
separate
a problem?
rooms? They're just going
separate
into their
rooms.
own. Yeah,
Okay.
they have Chromebooks, and they are in separate. They were issued Chromebooks that they went and got, and which didn't work, so we had to send them back. We had to take them back.
Oh wow.
And then they weren't configured correctly or something, and then both of them.
But you positioned them in separate rooms so they weren't interacting with each other while they were in class.
Yeah, and it's all in one. They're getting all their main courses in the morning, 1 hour chunks with 10-minute breaks, or 50-minute chunks with 10-minute breaks, or whatever. And then they are in the afternoon. They have this like 20-minute thing for some of the courses. So they're usually it looks like they're done by about one in the afternoon. Anyway, so it'll be interesting. We'll just keep on talking about it as it moves forward. Maybe they'll figure it out. What questions do we have, Phil?
Okay, Yam Tolan asks, are there any college teachers on this panel? I'd like to hear how they're doing asynchronous versus synchronous lecturing.
Now, go ahead, Kent. And then Greg.
Yeah, so I'm a university teacher, and the way I'm doing it is not lecturing at all. And, Alex has said before, the whole flip thing is that to make videos and make those like I did recently. I just finished videos, like usually one of my 50-minute lectures, it's down to like 5 minutes. And I just put all the points on there, goes super fast. It's loaded. Since it's on YouTube, they can go back and watch it later. So yeah, but being in front of people, it's better just to give that message once on a good video than try to lecture in real time.
Greg, and then Michael.
Yeah, I agree. It's the same principle. The flipped classroom. Right? I think it is the only way to do it. My biggest issue is engaging the students in discussion. My kids out here are very shy and nobody wants to talk. Right. So it's, I use your line, Alex. This is going to be a very short class. If you guys don't start coming up with some questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they want to hear stories.
Right.
Is really what they want to hear.
Michael, and then Bruce, and then Roscoe.
Yeah. So I teach computer science at Berkeley. So I have about 600 students across 2 courses right now, maybe more. And so, the question of sync versus async is really, I think, about the content. So all of our students are in, the context of the semester. So their learning is still synchronous. I'm not going to be doing many live lectures, I'm definitely going to be trying to record those, and so those will be asynchronous. But the lecture time will still be there. It'll be discussion. It'll be Q&A. I'm going to try and be doing some live coding. So we'll see how many months it takes me to end up on Twitch. I really hope not. But the other thing that I would say is, for discussion, all of our students spend time with undergraduate TAs. And so that is, 1 to 2 hours a week, depending on the course. And depending on the course, attendance is not always required, but that is highly synchronous. It's discussion. It's, interacting with the people that really, the pre-times, also make their college experience as well. So every course has a mix of these elements. And that's how I would really think about it, is what should be done live, what should be done asynchronously, and what takes advantage of those two timings.
Go ahead, Bruce, and then Roscoe.
Yeah, I'll go back a long way, in which I was working a lot with the Blackboard system. And then the Blackboard system is designed to be pretty purely asynchronous. So whenever the time came to give what you might call a lecture, the courses were already pre-prepared. And the teacher, I would give a lecture by writing it out as a comment at the beginning of the first week's presentations. And the only time that we did anything that involved something more modern, you made a YouTube video and presented a YouTube video and put it up where the learners could go to it. But that system, then I'm now working with a system that's, I would say, much more advanced, Canvas, in which you have the ability to use a tool called Studio to make videos and present them to the students. But still, Zoom, which is also attached, is mostly for discussions. So,
Roscoe?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting semester. We usually start out in the studio doing exercise work, trying to get the actors down off the stage and getting the directors trained on cameras and all that kind of stuff. I work inside a traditional stage program. We give them one last year. We're going on location from the get-go. So what we've decided to do is shoot everything at the back part of the class, but the first part of the class will be reviewing on Zoom what we shot the day before, totally separated. That's just the way we figured out we're going to do it.
Chris, you were going to say something?
Yes, to Greg's dilemma about shy students in discussion. I found that the rules that apply to us, Alex's number one rule is rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. The students need a little rehearsal too, and that's best done with one another. So if you can set up a discussion question that everyone can answer, like, what is your name and what does it mean and who does it connect you to in your family or in the canon of the saints? And have the students practice explaining themselves to one another. That often breaks the ice about the perceived penalties for speaking up.
Yeah, perceived.
Well, and one of the things I used to do when I teach really big, not really big classes, but 80 people at one time, was the first 4 hours was literally, why are you here? Like, what's your name? What do you do? Why are you here? If a class with a student, I probably wouldn't say, what do you do? But I would say, what do you want to do? What are you most interested in? And I would just go slowly weave through the whole 80 people to have that happen. And what it did was, everybody. So here's the methodology behind that, was that number one is that everyone got to talk, and it broke that seal of, I'm not going to talk in this class. And they talked about themselves, which broke another seal, and then I also used it. I had lots of content that I needed to cover in those 4 hours. So I would use it when someone said something that was near a note that I had internally of something I need to talk about. I would use that moment to tie that content into their share. So they would share something and I'd go, that's exactly like this. And I would explain something. So it wasn't all just them introducing themselves. I would get through all the content that I had to get through in that 4 hours, but I would do it using them as context, in that process. And so they really felt like they were it wasn't just them, this process of let's all jump around or let's whatever it was. It just felt like a conversation. But it also felt like they were learning something. It wasn't like everybody just introducing themselves. And then the other thing that happened is that by the end of it, everybody knows what everybody else is up to, and they immediately started networking. You know, like it was like this immediate, like that, I want to go talk to that person, and I want to talk to that person, and it pulled them all in to this conversation where they all, and it was a really, I found it to be a very useful methodology to kind of crack that up a little bit. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I use that same technique when I was teaching university teachers Final Cut and digital media production. One of the things I was going to say, though, is lean on your network of subject matter experts to invite them in. And it's not the shock and awe, but it does mix things up. So bringing somebody in via Zoom and then letting them see your dialogue in between them, just like what we're doing here. But it almost forces them to pay attention and then ask open-ended questions. Don't ask the yes, no type where name is just that's the end of the sentence. You know, it's like, what's your name? Guy Cochran. Boom.
And the thing is that they remember that, take advantage of the fact that it's a virtual classroom, because we did this in Rwanda where we would bring people in from America AFI or USC to talk about filmmaking, because I know they no longer had to fly to Rwanda. All they had to do is jump on their computer and be there, and they're in front of, you know, all of our students. And so the fact that you can, you know, have people come in and just talk through things is kind of amazing, which we're taking advantage of here, and definitely finding people in your network. You're absolutely correct. Bruce, and then John, and then Jeff, did you have something as well? Okay, go ahead, Bruce. Nope, I can't hear you, Bruce.
Excuse me. I want to put in a little plug for the pure asynchronous discussions. I taught graduate students, so it's a bit different, but having them have to deal with and write their answers out to discussion questions led to some great interactions and to helping them develop their ability to articulate in the way in which they needed to for their own writing. So it has a certain benefit. It wasn't anywhere near as fun. And as I go back and remember my own graduate study, getting together and talking led me to feel I had learned an awful lot. But I think that the writing out of things was something that had an important benefit, and we shouldn't forget that.
We have a thing here called Discord that you know, like, but something like it, being able to have those online discussions, I think is super useful. Go ahead, John, and then Jeff.
I'll pick up on the writing one. That works well with graduate students, not as well with undergraduates. Another thing that we did in a graduate seminar, which was great, was doing writing at the same time. So it's basically synchronous writing at the same time, which is very interactive. But I wanted to bring up an app. I put it in the chat, called Name Coach, and it follows up on what Alex was talking about, the importance of a student's names, particularly in online settings. And Name Coach is a great little app. I'm not teaching this semester. I'm helping faculty who are teaching. They called retired professors back. And this tool lets each student show how their name should be said. They could say their name, and the faculty member gets to learn it. And the power of saying someone's name, you know, if I say Greg, I'll see his eyes look up. Yep, that was it. So, you know, the name is very important, and particularly in Zoom events, to have people listening for their name. And if you to say it, you have to know it. And with our international students, I'm great at really botching people's names. So great little app and very successful on our campus.
That's great, Michael, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I was just going to add the asynchronous written discussion is one of those things that you can mix into any course format. And at Berkeley, with large numbers of students in a course, it becomes a really great way, to get students to just help answer each other's questions. And so there's a bunch of different tools you can use, but I definitely think whether it's graded or not graded, required or not, right? There are a ton of ways to put that in a course. And if you do have a large group, it can also ease your load, because you'll find that students really do like engaging and helping their peers learn as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Jamie Marsh wants to know any recommendations for low-cost cameras to feed an ATEM Mini for 3 cameras in a lab.
Mike?
On the same issue, I was looking for a lot of cameras with HDMI out to feed my ATEM Mini. And I'm going to mention some, and I'm sure that Alex has better ideas, but you can get a cheap camcorder from Amazon, which goes into $60, $70 range and just gives you a picture. It's a picture, it'll work, and it has HDMI out, and it has digital zoom and those kinds of things. But, you know, if you only just want to get something in there.
Jeff, Go
The
ahead.
next
Mike.
is a GoPro camera. It might be $150 to $200. This is the Hubble Cam HD Pro, which is $299, has HDMI out. It's 4K and it has a zoom, pan and tilt. You can remote control it. It's designed for conferences. If you use that, you can use one or more of those and cover your whole room. Guy has a Sony camera with lens he just talked about, so it's about $600, right? And then you go Black Magic, which you're talking about $800 up to $1,600. So those are choices I know about. What else? What did I forget, Alex?
Yeah. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Roscoe.
Yeah, I think
And
the
Jeff,
Vixia R 800 is 200 or $300, I think. So that might be a decent option. Not amazing, but it'll get the job done.
Absolutely. Roscoe and then Jeff.
I'm going to reach really deep into the Alex bag. HVs, HV 20s, 30s, 40s. You can find them in the used market. They don't cost much, and they have an HDMI out on the back.
Yeah, they have their 1080i. Just remember that they're 1080i. That's a little bit. But man, I used HV20s for a long time, and they have actually remarkably good image quality for what they are. Jeff.
So you can take a look at some CCTV security cameras. So this is a manual focus, manual zoom, which might be good in a lab that you could put over the top of things. $120 for HDMI,
Who makes that?
1080p. Mokose, Mokose. This one is a SDI, but they have an HDMI model as well.
Interesting. Yeah, that looks good.
I'll dig up a link and put it in there.
Yeah, that could be a great solution. Next question.
Chris Clark, what is being done to help all the teachers through this awkward period? Let's hear some partial small victories, success stories. Can the first year of teaching 2.0 be shorter than a full 180-day school year?
You go ahead, Emily.
Well, Wednesday and Thursday, I trained 350 teachers on how to use Zoom and use remote learning practices to build community, talking about what you guys were talking about a couple of questions ago. And the one awesome, little small victory was that the teachers recorded mini Zooms of themselves doing one task and then listened back to it, heard how horrible it sounded, and fixed it. So the district purchased webcams with built-in microphones and didn't purchase separate microphones for them. So I've been sending out Colin's microphone hack for them, the cheap one that teachers that want to purchase it can purchase it. Because they realized that the quality, so they watched Jeff Francis's video, they listened to me talk about importance of sounding good in all the things about Zoom, trying to get them ready just so that when we start, it's the best that they can do with what they have, as opposed to everybody scrambling last minute. But I still have real strong concerns about the broadband and the Ethernet connections and wondering if they're actually going to be able to all be online and clear on that first day of school when you have 60 teachers log in and 30 kids per class and, everybody's sharing files. It's going to be a crazy day. I'm looking forward to the first week of school.
I will say that as people have asked me what's the most important thing for teachers, I've come down to that pile, the pile solution is the most important thing that they can add to their computer just so that the students can hear them. I think that is just so key. Go ahead, Kent.
Yeah, one of the things I talked to some of my colleagues, and I really encourage them just to make a short video, even on their iPhone, just face to face, because we start Monday and who knows what's going to go wrong, and so just saying you don't want the first impression to be a bad impression. And so just do a short, hey, here's who I am. Here's why I love this class. I love school. I can't wait to be with you, just something really encouraging. And if they got that, that would start things on the right foot, probably.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, Emily, if bandwidth does become a super big concern and you're just doing point-to-point within the building or within the network, Zoom does have something called on-prem. So you can take a Windows server or a Linux machine, install on-prem, and the video does not leave the premises. It stays locally. It doesn't go up to the cloud and shoot back down. So this might be good for you as well, Alex, where you can keep stuff local, but it does take a Windows server or a Linux box. But it's good to know about because it doesn't suck all that bandwidth for no reason.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Next question.
Emily Russo, ideas. Teachers are meeting remotely through Zoom. They have smart boards connected to PCs and separate Chromebooks. How can they best be seen while sharing smart board screen in Zoom? picture-in-picture on an ATEM switcher?
Yeah, I think it's how do we do it without adding anything. I don't know how that mechanism works. I think is the problem. How the smart boards are connected to the Chromebooks. Are they through like HDMI or USB
Well,
or?
the teachers, we were just, and none of us have been in the classroom to test it out. And that's why I didn't know if anyone had any idea how it's going to work. But the PC is connected to the smart board. And so you can do extend screen. So you can share your screen and share the smart board screen directly through the Zoom, which I think is going to be the best solution to looking at the smart board, because teachers wanted to take those webcams the district bought and point them at a smart board, which I told them, you know, the white balance issue, you're not going to see anything and it's going to be terrible. But then the teachers were, especially the elementary teachers, were like, well, I want the kids to see me writing on the board and doing what I'm doing, but I can share my screen. And we couldn't figure out how to do that since the camera's on the Chromebook. And so we're joining as a co-host or a separate, you know, and pinning the video. But if you pin the video, then it's not the smart board. So any ideas that might help me get quality?
Jeff, and then Michael, and then Colin.
I would think if you go into Zoom settings on the screen share and enable side-by-side mode, and then have the host of the meeting, whether it's the smartboard PC or the Chromebook PC, spotlight the Chromebook webcam, and then you'll get side-by-side. And I don't know if the excuse me, I don't know if the host can, or if each user can adjust sliding side to side how big the smartboard screen is and how big the picture-in-picture the spotlight is. Hope that made sense. Jason was giving me a thumbs up.
Michael, and then Mickey, and then Colin.
Yeah, I was going to recommend the same side-by-side thing. I do actually think that depending on the classroom lighting, if you were to put a webcam on a tripod, so you would really need two cameras to do this right, in that you don't want to be fiddling with it. I have seen people, you know, spend the time to align the camera with a tripod, get the lighting decent, and you can then see what's on a whiteboard decently well. And if you combined the camera view with the share screen so that the text of the smartboard was a little bit clear, I think that could be a good view. It's not as cheap, of course, but I wouldn't knock trying the webcam pointed at a whiteboard until you play around with it.
And Emily, are there students in the classroom, or is it all, so they're using the classroom to broadcast?
Yeah, they're making the teachers come into the building, which doesn't make any sense to me because of, like I said, the broadband issues, but there has to be accountability since some teachers in the spring weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing because we're not adults. Sarcasm. But they, what the big problem is that there's no kids in the building until after October 8th. And so the teachers have to come in and present from their classrooms, and their smart boards are in a lockdown place, their PCs in a lockdown place. So, and it's away from the smart board off to the side. So we were just trying to find a way that they could see the whiteboard. We did point the webcam at the whiteboard, and it just, the quality, it's too blurry. It's too far, you know, like you can't get a good look, but we haven't been able to use, like, we weren't in the building since the spring to try and do the Zoom meeting, share the screen, and have a camera running at the same time so that the kids can see the teacher and also see very clearly what's being done on the smart board.
Right. Mickey, Colin, and Bruce, real quick.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, if you do the whole webcam thing, you'll have to run, as Alex always says, run tests and make sure like what you're right on the board would be viewable even in a mobile phone screen. So it's gonna have to be large text. And also with the whole idea of the side by side versus picture in picture, that's a user by user setting. So each student would have to set either picture in picture or side by side, unless of course it's a webinar platform where the host can select the view.
Right. Colin, and then Bruce, and then.
Two items come to mind. First, you say the PC is distant from the Chromebook and the webcam is attached to the Chromebook. I would ask why. Why is the webcam not attached to the PC so that you could perform switching on the PC? and that way you can show either yourself or the smartboard output. And secondarily, the other option would be to have the PC come into the secondary Zoom user and simply have the smartboard output in one window and yourself in another window, and you could just pin yourself or the smartboard at any given time.
Bruce?
This is just maybe a crazy idea, but we have you guys all have a lot of expertise and systems here. Is there any way we could simulate the problem you have, Emily, with some of our equipment, put it together and see if it worked? Testing out some of these ideas?
Yeah, let's figure out what they are. I mean, and tomorrow is a good time for us to try to figure it out. So
yeah, we can certainly do this offline and
let's
chat on
do it
it
offline and then talk about it tomorrow, and even try it tomorrow. See what we can do. We're in a different platform, so it's a little harder on our end. But go ahead, Greg, and then Phil, and then Guy.
What's the? I guess I'm having trouble figuring out what's the purpose of having a separate view of the teacher at the whiteboard. What does that mean?
So for the younger kids, that especially we're talking K4, they kind of need, they need that, see their teacher writing on the board. So when they're writing their letters out on that, you remember the double lines with the dot down the center and you learned how to write your letters. Watching the teacher actually move as well as watch the pen make stuff happen on their screen is what those teachers really want. They feel strongly that the presence of the teacher and the board that they're looking at or the screen that they're looking at have to be seen.
We find that useful for older kids too. They don't watch the screens by themselves for very long without going somewhere else. Phil, and then Guy.
I'm just wondering, is maybe the smartboard overcomplicating it, and could the same thing be achieved? This is just with a camera and a pad of paper and eliminating the smartboard altogether.
I mean, I will say that I'm very partial. I mean, you can't change it. I know that you can't change it, Emily. You're trying to figure out within the constraints that you have. The problem with boards in general is that it turns the teacher away from the, but I can see what they're saying. You have to see mechanically how it's working. And so what I've done is used Wacom tablets and then cameras on the Wacom tablets, to make that work. But I understand where you're coming from. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, if there's a way to have one of the kids act as a Zoom jockey or get a teacher's assistant to push a button. So basically, if you right-clicked on my head right now, you would see an option, because we have it enabled, that says request camera control. He just took mine. I don't know if I have anything really to switch to. Everybody's doing it now. Stop. Yeah. Okay. So basically, once they have control, they can just switch cameras. So depending on how many cameras you have hooked up, like right now, if somebody, I think I gave Alex control, if you hit it, it would probably, I don't even know what it'd go to because I have so many virtual inputs that it would probably start cycling through. I think I have vMix on this machine. You'll probably lose me, actually. Don't do it because I'll get lost.
Okay.
But yeah, so Emily, if you just have two sources, two webcams, and the student can hit switch camera. So what will happen on their end is they'll see a dialog box that says switch camera, and they can just switch that. And so they can be rotating between whiteboard and the teacher for the show, essentially the class. But yeah, a large portion of communication is nonverbal. So it is, the physiology. So it's important for these teachers and these kids to be able to demonstrate, emotions through body language.
Yep. Next question.
Bruce Francis, in a flipped asynchronous synchronous design, can the computer track and let the teacher know, A, if the students did the pre-work, and B, if they had common types of mistakes?
So are you talking about, did they watch the videos or did they do the work?
Both and one, either one or both. It's a matter of having the teacher know when you ask the students to do some work, how did it go? Rather than just waiting till the discussion to find out.
Right, Michael?
Oh, yeah. So I think most online tools that teachers have access to will do a pretty decent job of this. Everything from, Google Forms, where there's a response, and you can, Google Forms now actually has a particular quiz mode that does sort of the auto tabulating of results for you, which can be nice. But things like Blackboard, Canvas, all those things are have modes that will give you feedback as to what's been watched. I work for a company called Gradescope part-time, and so I'm building some quizzing tools or enhancing them with inline videos that I'm going to be using this fall. But pretty much every platform has something like that, and it's a matter of finding the local tools, I think, that are best. And then just making sure that you have a buffer between when things are due and when class starts, so that you actually, as the instructor, have time to review it. I frequently forget to leave that buffer in there for myself.
Greg and Kent.
Well, what I'm going to try is using Canvas and creating the the flipped material as an assignment, and then requiring that they write something about it, one comment about it, and submit that as an assignment. But in Canvas, you can set it so that they're not able to submit anything until they finish the video. So, we've never used it before. I've never used it before, but that's what I'm going to try starting next week. We've already had our first week of class this week.
Kent and then Chris.
Yeah, so I think it's all tied to the learning management system, which you do one of the questions is, did you watch it? And it's up to them to be honest or not, or do you do the reading and then put the quizzes up there? And then kind of what Michael was saying is give yourself enough leeway then to go ahead and review what happened on it. And the learning management system should be able to spit out some sort of summary of it, I would think.
Go ahead, Chris.
In an online course that I co-taught last spring, we had an assignment due each Wednesday that each student would post a couple of paragraph summary of some big ideas in the readings. And then each student was also paired with another student, and they had to respond to one another's post. It was called in the discussion section of Canvas, so that by the time we got together face to face, the students had been kind of required to both read and then write about the reading material and then respond to one another's writing about the reading material. So the processing went up.
John?
I'm going to give credit to George Station. What he did is in instructional design, you talk about advanced organizer. So at the start of the class, you give an overview. It's the old Marine story. When you're going to teach a Marine, you tell them what you're going to tell them. You tell them, then you tell them again, then you repeat it 3 times. It's the best you can do. What he did was did a random picking each class and asked a student to say, will you give the advanced organizer? Will you give a brief summary of whatever it was, whether it was an article or a video? And since that was random, every student didn't know whether they were going to be asked to do that brief summary. And it really was a great advanced organizers, because we found out from some testing that most of the students did it within the first half hour before the class. So it was fresh in their mind. A good strategy that he's using this fall.
I mean, the thing that I've always focused on is that the things I remember from school that I actually have memorized were generally some kind of game or some kind of challenge that I enjoyed. And so I'm always just trying to find, as a teacher, how do I have something that the students are engaged in and they're using up the content that I give them because they have to, like they're interested in this thing and they have to figure it out, and and it's something that they're passionate about, and they're coming to me as a resource, not as the teacher who's telling them what they have to learn and then testing them, but I'm the coach helping them figure out how to do the thing that they want to do. And it's not possible all the time, but almost everything I do is trying to figure that out. And I spend more time figuring out what the subject matter will be than what the some subject matter that'll be interesting to the students, that is going to have them be excited about that. I mean, I still know German lines from something from German class. I don't remember most of German class. I just remember the part where we did a newscast, and as a student, as a junior or a sophomore in high school, I talked about toxic toilet paper in my high school and why it was a real problem, and how, it was a funny thing, but I learned a lot of German, and so I think that figuring out how we apply that more to what I call dessert first training or dessert first education. Is I don't want you to feel like you have to eat your vegetables first. The whole thing should just feel like ice cream. And not that I get to that all the time, but that I am constantly trying to serve the students ice cream. Of things that are fun and good, and then they happen to accidentally learn everything they needed to learn while they were going down that path. John?
A lot of the faculty in our workshops in the summer, and again, the California State University system was the first large system to say we're totally going online. And there was resistance originally at the gamification. There's a thing called Kahoot games and things. But eventually the faculty in the subgroup I was working with came around that, games aren't necessarily bad, a little competition, a little bit of fun. And they just got to the point that if we were going to be doing this for a 15-week semester, you have to have, and of course we're doing it in 12-week semesters, but you have to do something that's fun and some sort of game, some sort of challenge.
Challenges.
Yeah, go ahead.
I am careful with games, I will say, because it can be very, can really drive students away. I mean, it can, if they lose over and over and over again, they can just disengage. And so I worry about games sometimes, but I also challenges I do all the time. Like that's pretty much my entire MO is challenge-based learning.
No, I don't think we're playing games where there's winners and losers. I think
right.
We try to come up with games where it's a challenge, getting your better score, doing better than that. But yeah, I agree. You don't want to be the person in the spelling bee who gets called last on the team every time.
right, exactly.
That was me.
I always felt like it's not a very creative mind that can't spell something in more than a couple different ways. Anyway,
I'm a certified dyslexic, but I believe belong to a group called Dyslexics Untie.
Yeah. All right. Next question.
Tim McKean wants to know, what limitations have you experienced with Zoom on Chromebook, if any?
Emily?
So I have a one pager that I put on Discord for presenters and for hosts about what the limitations are based on your device. And so for the kids, like participants and hosts cannot participate. Well, they can participate in polls if it's being hosted by someone who's not on a Chromebook. But if you're hosting from a Chromebook, you can't do a poll. Annotation tools and whiteboard are not available to you. Sharing your screen's harder. So there's a lot of limitations on a Chromebook for the host as well as for the participants.
Go ahead, Mike.
When I first joined, I was on a Chromebook, and you should know that you can even do dual monitor setup if you have like the USB adapter that has HDMI out. So, I didn't know what I was missing until I went over to the Mac to try it on Zoom, but subject to the limitation of the screen resolution, you can pretty much do everything as an attendee, not as a host, I suppose. Right. So,
John,
I just want to thank Emily for that. That was a very useful document and has had visibility. So, thank you.
Yeah. Next question.
Yes, another one from Tim. For teachers that need to be on Wi-Fi in the classroom, are there ideas for making separate network for the teacher to increase stability of their connection, trying to stay off the same connection students are on, thinking of digging up an old Airport Express?
The hard part is the industry standard is Cisco, because you can really build out all of those different they have a bunch of different products that we've used to do that. That's an IT infrastructure question. Adding Wi-Fi to your classroom without IT will make them really upset. So, that's all I would say is that because they're already trying to handle they're trying to handle the Wi-Fi, and if you add more Wi-Fi, into their channels, you're making their hard job already more complicated. So the only thing I would say there is digging up something. It's more of a request to IT to give the teachers their own Wi-Fi channels with protected VLANs. So what you want to ask for is that the teacher should have a protected VLAN. A virtual local area network. So they want their own protected bandwidth to make sure that they can do what they need to do. And then the students will share something that's less than if you're on Wi-Fi. But you have to note that Wi-Fi stability is largely driven by the number of devices around the number of APs, and has less to do with the bandwidth available. I mean, bandwidth available is always important, but when you're talking about Wi-Fi specifically, it's what that AP is talking to, all the other APs and all the other devices. And so as you add those, you reduce the stability. And literally, I've worked in companies that have multiple 10 gig connections into their building, and their Wi-Fi is still falling apart because they've got thousands of employees that all have Wi-Fi devices, and it's the Wi-Fi devices changing state, moving, that causes the APs to, because the APs are talking to them all. And we have to remember that Wi-Fi was developed before we did real-time video. They're not designed for it, and they fall down all the time. Jeffrey, Jason, Michael, John, real quick.
If there's an Ethernet port to plug in that Airport Express, there's an Ethernet port to plug in a long Ethernet cable and run it around the side of the room and plug it directly into your computer.
Monoprice cables. Monoprice is 100-foot cable is like $14. Go ahead, Jason.
I couldn't agree more. But if for any reason you get any pushback and you need an Airport Express, please give IT the MAC address and be like, if you see this on the network, it's me.
And then they'll immediately tell you don't do that.
They'll immediately kick you out.
Michael, and then John.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Jeff basically said what I was going to say, which is, if you can wire the Airport Express, you might actually have a benefit based on what Alex just said about it being limited to devices. But, really, I would try and wire it in first if you can. But, if you have it, you might just try it and see what happens after some testing as well.
Go ahead,
but Jason is also right.
John.
I was just going to say, you will get attention when you bring the whole school systems networks down. But we use Cinemaker to do a 4-camera shoot with an iPad as a switcher, and we found that we had to set up our own network, and you could get really inexpensive Wi-Fi units that were used for gaming nights. So they're cheap, and that was a separate network, and we were able to get great video with our own little enclosed network. But then we had to connect that to the school network, and that takes some challenges.
Yeah, Roscoe and then Mickey.
Oh, I was just going to say, any Mac with a connected to Ethernet is a Wi-Fi hotspot. And I've done it many a time. I do sniff and see what channels aren't in use before I activate it.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, but to what Roscoe said, like, you can't, I mean, like, a lot of the educators aren't as technical as, as yourself. So, yeah, same with, I agree completely with what Alex, Jason, and Jeff mentioned earlier, that like, just don't mess around, especially like with the 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, wherein there are much limited channels available. Just don't. You could make the experience better for yourself, but it might screw everyone else.
And the problem is, if it becomes viral and all those teachers start doing it, then it really becomes a really complicated puzzle. And I think that, I just think that working with IT to get separate VLANs is good, or just running an Ethernet cable 200 feet is another place to go. Go ahead, Colin.
I just want to second adding the 100-foot Ethernet cable to your standard kit. We've been doing that for talent for who are operating from home, and the same thing applies in school.
We call that my
Monoprice is
Wi-Fi
great. Yeah, Monoprice is great for that sort of thing. Cyberguys.com is good for that sort of thing. You can't really get any savings by buying a reel of Ethernet cable of 1,000-foot and cutting your own. It's not worth it. Just buy the things.
I started off with building Ethernet cables. I build a lot of cables, and I'll talk about soldering, but building Ethernet cables, that's like my definition of, if I went to hell, they're probably going to make me just make.
They've made it a lot easier than back in the Stone Age.
It's still horrible.
Oh no, it's terrible.
Easier. Yeah. Okay, it's just you're running barefoot over gravel, not glass. That's all they've changed. All right, next question.
I suppose also the other, just tether to your iPhone and just go rogue. Just stay off the school's network altogether. No.
Yeah, it's still a bunch of because there's still Wi-Fi connecting to that, right? I mean, you can
tether by a USB.
But then it's your own.
Oh yeah. You can tether via USB and then do it, and that would. But you won't find that to be much more stable. I think you'll have.
Yeah, but the fact is, you shouldn't have to take these ridiculous steps.
Anyway,
the IT department should just deliver you a working solution.
They should, and again, what happens is when we bend the rules rather than force the rules to be fixed, we end up in this kind of half state. Where, if you get all the teachers together and have them, part of it's educating all the teachers that this is important, and have them understand why their classes are falling apart, and encourage insurrection. That's gonna, so where things get handled. And, IT is just putting out fires, and all you have to do is become the biggest one. So anyway, all right, next question.
All right, Craig Hibbard, idea for better whiteboards. Use Keynote Live.
I love Keynote Live for that, for whiteboards. just going to a blank Keynote on a iPad is a great white slate that you can just draw on, and I've literally done ones where I just have a whole bunch of what I got into was putting up like 60 pages of stuff, and then I can just go to the next one and just keep on writing, and it doesn't save it. So that's the only thing that's a little bit of a bummer. I think that would be cool. Have an as-built version of it. Yeah, this is Keynote, right? Yeah, and just having that's a really easy one to use. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, could you enable whiteboard for us for tomorrow's session and we can give it a try? Because I actually have a 27
Do I not have it
inch.
enabled right now? I thought I turned it on.
I'm not sure. Maybe somebody else can give it a shot. But if you add,
I don't know how to. I don't
tomorrow
even know
I'll
how to
join.
do it.
It's in the back end on meetings or webinar.
But where would it show up once I turn it on? I could have sworn I turned it on.
Screen
after the
sharing.
request.
Under screen sharing. Do you see it, Michael? If you pull it?
No, host has disabled
don't see
attendee
it.
screen sharing.
You gotta make it
I don't
co-host.
see whiteboard on my end.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
All
think
right,
it's
so
enabled.
I'll take a look.
So tomorrow I have a 27 inch that when you draw on it, I mean, it looks pristine. And so I think that's what a lot of people are getting at is that on these little screens, if you do 640 by 480 or 360p, it just falls apart. And so if you do proper screen sharing on a bigger monitor, you can do like complex math problems and really have a lot of real estate to play with rather than just being sucked in this little tiny screen.
Right,
So
Michael.
if we can play tomorrow, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll enable it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I like Keynote. I also on tablets, most of the note-taking apps are really good. So one of my favorite techniques is to just use Apple Notes or Notability, and both of those let you just save either a PDF or something else at the end. If you have had a chance to play with iOS 14 or are interested in upgrading, when it's out in a few months, the text editing features for handwritten notes that are coming there, it's really like we finally got back to 1991 with the Newton, except this time it works. And so that stuff is really cool, and I'm super excited to put it into practice somehow.
John?
I'll try to have this as a show tomorrow, but it's called Doceri. And Alex, you mentioned it. What Doceri lets you do is you whiteboard on an iPad, and it saves every stroke, and then you could play it back.
That's great.
So we've had people who've done math formulas, filled up a full whiteboard the first period, and then the second period they didn't have to touch it again. They just stepped through the steps.
Right. Next question.
Craig says, for student engagement, anyone try any offbeat methods? Ask a question about your weather, tell a story, show and tell a single item, jump up and down off camera, run around the room. Any other ideas?
Go ahead,
Student
Emily.
engagement.
I have an entire slide deck that I put together of different activities to do to keep kids engaged as icebreakers, especially for the first 2 weeks of school that involve little things. Like we had a GIF battle yesterday with the teachers. So they had to respond to how they felt about last year's remote learning with a GIF and then how they are looking forward to this year. And I have to tell Alex there was a floating dumpster fire in one of them, which was pretty hilarious. But the teachers filled it out and it was really fun and engaging. And so having those kind of different activities, especially when there's a little bit of tech in there, when you're trying to front load how to use the, if you're using slides, if you're using PowerPoint, if you're using, Keynote, you can build activities around that as well as have the kids go run off and find their favorite object they've owned for at least 10 years and then tell them why they picked that object. Little things like that just to get the kids up, moving, coming back, sharing, and then it builds that community. So I will share that in the chat and on Discord for you guys. But it just has, I got it from Twitter too. It was just a bunch of teachers have been posting SEL, social emotional learning activities that they're doing for the first couple of weeks of school. And I just combined them into one document so that other people could use them.
That's great. Jeff and then Michael.
This goes back to opening icebreakers, but with my students who are college audio recording people from all degrees, I want to get them talking about music because they all love music. That's why they're there. So I'll ask them favorite artist currently, favorite artist of all time, and then their favorite guilty pleasure. And that just kind of opens things up when they can actually talk about something they love.
Yeah. Michael?
Yeah. Similar thing. Icebreakers run the gamut. One of my TAs gave me the question instead of favorite song, your favorite walk-up, or what would you choose as a walk-up song, which I thought got really good responses. The other thing for engagement in general is I tend to think about it as, you don't have to expect complete engagement all at once. And so, for me, sometimes it really works to get people to type in text chat, especially like in a Zoom meeting, and then use that to build, some more video on audio interactive engagement over time, and just reduce that barrier to entry for students.
And I think the hardest part is, like there's students like me that when I was a kid would just be angry if I was asked to do anything other than what I was there in the class to do. And so I didn't want to jump up. I didn't want to do anything else. So like, we're here for math or we're here for whatever, just keep the conversation in the lane. And I didn't like having out of lane things. And then also like my kids were asked questions for engagement yesterday. And as a parent, somebody's getting an email, and it's not going to be nice, about like how that was like, that question was not appropriate. And, I'm going to fire somebody. I'm going to light a fire under somebody for asking it, so you just have to be super careful about it's getting out of the lane is a pretty, just think through it real quickly. I'm sure it was a good idea, or thought of as a good idea, but you get angry parents pretty quickly. Bruce, because we see it a lot more now because we see the Chromebook. Go ahead, Bruce.
One technique that I found useful with getting groups together was to have people pair off and get to know each other, and then take on the job of introducing their partner to the rest of the group. And that leads them to have to find out more about the individual that they're going to talk about, and then actually get up and make some kind of a comment as well. So that I found that to be a good starter icebreaker.
And last question. 4 minutes left.
Peter Moore, my younger brother is a school principal in rural Victoria, Australia, and my sister is a teacher in full lockdown in Melbourne. Would you like me to ask them what, how, etc. they are doing or using?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
absolutely.
We would
I
love
guess
to know.
it's late, but we're always. I think that what's interesting is that we're seeing a wide variety of ways that people are attacking this. I think we're all learning from each other as to what the challenges are and what the solutions might be, and I think that's the goal here. So definitely, and have them come join us if they can. I know it's late, but come jump on the panel. Kent? Nope, can't hear you.
As long as it doesn't include Vegemite, we'll be good.
Vegemite is so good. I love Vegemite. I love Vegemite and Marmite. I think they're both good. Yeah, absolutely. But I also like Swedish licorice, which is I'm told is an acquired taste, but I've always enjoyed it. Anyway, John.
I was just going to say that would be a lot of fun because we're finding that there's some things that are very U.S. centric, and there's a group of international faculty in the ADE group, and I think we could learn some ideas. So those Australians come up with some pretty things. Grant's been a real star for us, so it'd be fun to have some other Aussies here.
No, absolutely. You were going to say, Greg?
I was just going to say that one of the biggest problems for anybody outside of the U.S. is the cost of things. You guys can go to Amazon and grab this thing for $14. That's $70 to me.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a barrier for Europeans and other peoples.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, we've reached the end of the hour. Yet another fun hour of discussion there, and we will do this again. So we didn't get to something, Michael. I saw you just added one. So I apologize for that. But will
yeah,
it
was just dropped in Zoom chat. So
okay. If we can, we're going to continue again tomorrow at 9. The same discussion, same, so at 9 o'clock, 9 to whenever we run out of questions, which I think last time was like 11:30. But definitely, if you're an educator, tell your friends. Saturday mornings are a good time for them to come. We'd love to have as many people that want to join. I think what's great is that we're now getting to a point where most of this group are educators in the panel, and and giving incredible insight into what the challenges are as well as what some of the solutions are. So we just hope more will join the panel and more will join the attendees, and we'll keep moving this conversation forward. Go ahead, Greg.
And I think it's going to be really interesting once we get a couple of weeks of teaching under our belts and we see all the issues.
Yep.
And how it goes.
And that's one of the reasons that I just wanted to dedicate a lot of time to it, because I felt like we'll get our wits about us in the first couple of weeks, and then there's going to be a lot of people trying to figure out how to do this, and I think that we can keep moving forward. And I think we're already making an impact. If you look at Jeff's video of how to get set up, is now getting spread to hundreds and hundreds of people or thousands of people. So I think that those kinds of things, and what Emily's doing as far as giving us some of the content that's coming to Discord from her guides that are now being distributed to lots of people. And so I think that this group is starting to make some really interesting impacts. So all we have to do is keep doing it. So anyway, so thank you to everybody who's go ahead.
And good luck to all to everyone for the next few weeks who is starting teaching as these weeks roll on.
Yeah,
and also wins in the next few weeks, not just the issues.
Yes. Well, let's talk. Yeah. So one of the things that I want to definitely focus on a little bit tomorrow is making sure that we have some dedicated time to what's working. So there's a lot of us talking about challenges, but let's talk about like what's working for us, what's succeeding, so that we can kind of learn from each other in that area. So I'll probably ask questions. We may shift the gears of the questions to not just questions, but to comments about what people are finding working. And then think about it. If you're going to come tomorrow, well, even if you're not going to come tomorrow, but think about the things that you see that are working in your part of education, so that we can talk a little bit about that tomorrow as well. All right. Thank you, everybody. And I just love hanging out with you. Love talking about this stuff. And I think it's just an amazing group. So thanks to everyone who's come. Thanks to all the attendees that gave us great questions, and the panelists who had generated a great discussion. And we'll see you all bright and early tomorrow. Mickey, hit it. So got a great week next week. We'll send the announcement out over the weekend, but we've got a lot of great speakers, so stand by for that. And otherwise, remember, 7 to 9, 2 hours of general discussion, and then 9 to 11 is education. So see you in the morning. Bye.